If you've tried to buy literally anything in the last few years, you might have noticed something subtle, which is that you're not actually buying it. You are subscribing to it. Not in a dramatic, philosophical way at first, just in a very normal, everyday way. You open an app, you see a price, and somewhere in small, emotionally strategic text, it says per month. And at that point, you have two choices. You can accept that this is how things work now, or you can spend 10 minutes trying to find the one-time purchase option, which either does not exist or is hidden behind a sequence of clicks that feels like a test of character. So naturally, people are asking the question, why is everything a subscription now? And the answer is simple, because it works, but also because everything else stopped working as well as it used to. But also because this is what happens when you combine technology, business incentives, and the human tendency to ignore small recurring costs until they form a personality. To understand why subscriptions are everywhere, we need to understand what changed, because this is not just a pricing decision. This is a structural shift. A long time ago, which in economic terms means before everything required an account, you bought things. You paid once, you owned the product. That was the end of the relationship. If you bought a piece of software, it came in a box. If you bought music, it was a physical object. If you bought a movie, you could hold it, lose it, and eventually find it again in a drawer that also contained mysterious cables. Ownership was the default, which made sense because distribution was physical. If a company wanted to sell something, it had to produce it, ship it, store it, and then hope you bought it. Once you bought it, the transaction was complete. There was no ongoing connection, which meant there was no ongoing revenue. Now, fast forward to now, where distribution is digital. Products are no longer things you hold, they are things you access. Software is downloaded, music is streamed, movies exist in a menu that disappears if you stop paying. And once products become access-based instead of ownership-based, the entire business model changes. Because now, instead of selling something once, companies can charge continuously, and continuous revenue is extremely appealing. From a business perspective, subscriptions solve multiple problems at the same time. First, they make revenue predictable. Instead of hoping that customers return to buy again, companies can rely on recurring payments. This makes planning easier. It makes growth more stable. It makes investors significantly more comfortable, which is important because investors tend to react poorly to uncertainty. Second, subscriptions increase total revenue. If you sell a product once for a fixed price, that is the maximum amount you will ever earn from that customer. If you charge monthly, the total amount increases over time. And because the payments are small, they feel manageable, which means people are more likely to agree to them. Which brings us to the third reason, psychology. Subscriptions work because they feel different from one-time purchases. If something costs a large amount up front, people hesitate. If the same thing is split into smaller monthly payments, it feels more affordable, even if the total cost is higher over time. This is not a flaw in human thinking, it is a feature. Humans are very good at evaluating immediate costs and very bad at evaluating long-term accumulation. So when a subscription says just a few dollars per month, your brain interprets that as basically free, which is not technically accurate, but is emotionally convenient. Now, combine this with something else, friction. Subscriptions are easy to start. One click, one confirmation, and suddenly you have access. But they are often slightly more difficult to cancel. Not impossibly difficult, just enough steps that you might decide to do it later. And later is where subscriptions live, because if enough people forget to cancel, the system works even better. Now, none of this explains why subscriptions expanded beyond software and media to everything else, because now you can subscribe to food, clothing, transportation, storage, productivity tools, and things you did not realize could have a monthly fee until they did. And the reason for that is something called the access economy. Ownership is being replaced by access, not because ownership disappeared, but because access is more flexible. If you own something, you are responsible for it. You maintain it, store it, repair it, and deal with it when it becomes outdated. If you subscribe to something, those responsibilities are transferred to the provider. You just use it. This is convenient. It reduces effort. It reduces commitment. And companies respond by offering more subscription-based services, which reinforces the system. Now, this is where things become slightly more complicated. At some point, you have a collection of subscriptions that together form a monthly cost that is not insignificant, but because each one is small, they don't feel significant on their own, which is how you end up in a situation where you're paying for multiple things you don't actively think about. This is sometimes called subscription fatigue, which is a polite way of saying, I forgot how many things I'm paying for until I checked. Now let's talk about something else, control. When you own something, you control it. You can use it whenever you want, for as long as you want, without ongoing permission. When you subscribe to something, access depends on payment. If you stop paying, access stops, which means control shifts from the user to the provider. This is not necessarily a problem in all cases. For services that are continuously updated or maintained, subscriptions make sense. But when everything becomes a subscription, the balance changes, because now access to many aspects of your daily life depends on ongoing payments, which creates a system where you're not just buying things, you're maintaining access to them continuously. Now, add technology into this. Modern systems are designed to support subscriptions, accounts, cloud storage, automatic billing, personalized recommendations. All of these make it easier to manage ongoing relationships between users and services, which means the infrastructure for subscriptions is already in place, and once the infrastructure exists, it tends to be used. Now, combine everything: business incentives, psychological factors, technological capabilities, and changing consumer preferences, and you get a system where subscriptions are the default. Not because someone decided it should be that way, but because multiple factors pushed in the same direction. Now, here's the part that makes this slightly more interesting. Subscriptions are not inherently bad. They can provide value. They can make services more accessible. They can allow continuous improvements and updates. They can reduce upfront costs. But they also change how ownership works. They shift costs over time. They create ongoing dependencies, and they make it easier to spend money without fully noticing it. So the experience becomes mixed, convenient, but also slightly expensive, flexible, but also slightly expensive. Now, let's talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough, the pricing tier system, because subscriptions rarely come in one version. They come in three. There's the basic tier, which technically works but is missing enough features that you're constantly reminded it's the basic tier. There's the middle tier, which is described as most popular, which is marketing language for this is the one we actually want you to buy. And there's the premium tier, which mostly exists to make the middle tier feel like a reasonable compromise. This is called anchoring, and it works extremely well, because when you see three options, you rarely pick the cheapest. It feels limiting. You rarely pick the most expensive. It feels excessive. You pick the middle one, which is exactly what the pricing was designed to make you do. And once you're on the middle tier, you're paying more than you would have if there had only been one option. But it doesn't feel that way, because you didn't pick the most expensive one, so you feel like you made a sensible decision, which you did, inside a system that was designed to guide you to it. Now, let's talk about something that rarely gets mentioned, the trial period. Most subscriptions begin with a free trial, 7 days, 14 days, 30 days, which sounds generous, and in isolation it is, but the trial period exists for a specific reason. It's not because companies want to be generous. It's because getting someone to start using a product is the hardest part. Once you've set up an account, connected your data, learned the interface, and integrated the service into your routine, canceling becomes more complicated. Not technically. Technically, you can cancel anytime, but psychologically, canceling now means losing the thing you already set up. It means starting over somewhere else. It means effort. And effort is the enemy of cancellation. So the trial period isn't really about giving you a chance to evaluate the product. It's about getting you invested in it before you start paying, which is a subtle but important distinction. Now, let's talk about price increases. Subscriptions have another advantage for companies that rarely gets acknowledged directly. They make price increases easier to implement. If you sell something once, you can only charge the price at the point of sale. Once that transaction is complete, the price is fixed. If you charge monthly, you can raise the price at renewal. And because the increase is usually small and because canceling feels effortful, most people accept it. They might notice, they might briefly consider canceling, they might even open the app and look at the cancel button.
But then they decide it is not worth the effort, and the subscription continues at the new price, which means prices can drift upward over time with relatively little resistance. Not dramatically, just consistently. Just enough that you notice it in aggregate, but not enough to act on it individually, which is efficient. Now let's add something else. Data. Subscriptions give companies ongoing access to information about how you use their product, which features you use, how often, what you ignore, what you return to. This data is valuable. It tells them what to build next, what to remove, and what to charge more for. It allows them to identify the features that matter most to users and then move those features to a higher tier. Not because that is malicious, but because that is what the data says will generate more revenue. Which means, over time, the product can shift in ways that gradually push more users toward more expensive plans, all based on understanding exactly how people use a service, which is only possible because the subscription model creates a continuous relationship rather than a one-time transaction. Ownership gave you the product and ended the connection. A subscription keeps the connection open indefinitely. And an open connection is very useful if you're trying to optimize a business. Now let's go back to the original idea. You don't own things anymore. You rent your existence in small monthly payments. This is an exaggeration, but it is not entirely inaccurate because more and more aspects of daily life are moving toward access-based models. You subscribe to entertainment, you subscribe to software, you subscribe to storage, you subscribe to services that manage other subscriptions, which is a very efficient system if you think about it. Now, does this trend continue? Probably, because it aligns with how modern systems are designed. It aligns with business incentives. It aligns with consumer behavior. It aligns with the general direction of technology. But it will also likely reach a point where people start pushing back, where the total monthly cost becomes visible enough that people start auditing what they actually use, where the number of subscriptions becomes noticeable enough that alternatives become appealing again. Bundling, consolidation, or even a return to some forms of ownership for specific categories of products, because systems tend to move in cycles. There is already a growing market for buy-once software, for products that explicitly advertise lifetime access as a feature, for companies that position themselves against the subscription model as a selling point, which suggests that not everyone is satisfied with the direction things went. But for now, subscriptions are the dominant model because they solve real problems for companies: predictable revenue, higher lifetime value, continuous data, and a customer relationship that does not end at the point of sale. And they feel convenient for users, at least at the beginning, at least when there are only a few. The problem is not any individual subscription. The problem is what happens when the model becomes universal, when every tool, every service, every small piece of functionality that you rely on comes with a monthly fee attached. At that point, your cost of living quietly includes a layer of ongoing access payments that did not exist 10 years ago, and that layer is invisible enough that it rarely gets examined directly until someone actually adds it up. And then it's slightly surprising, which is by design. Not in a conspiratorial way, just in the sense that a system optimized to reduce friction around payments is also, by definition, a system optimized to reduce your awareness of it. Convenience and invisibility often come together, and when spending becomes invisible, it becomes easier, which is good for companies and something worth noticing for everyone else. So the next time you see a price and it says per month, just remember that you are not just buying something. You are entering a relationship. A small, ongoing, automatically renewing relationship. A tiered pricing structure, a free trial designed to make leaving harder, a data collection agreement buried in the terms, and the cancel button that's slightly harder to find than the subscribe button, which you may or may not remember to end. And that's kind of the point. If this kind of breakdown is useful to you, consider subscribing. Every week, we explain the systems shaping money, work, and everyday life. Clearly, without jargon, and without pretending any of it is simpler than it is. Subscribe below. See you in the next one. And if you are currently subscribed to something you forgot about, now might be a good time to check.